Hi guys. Recently, myself and my friend released a video on a Glastonbury game, and in that, Fish started talking about a rugby analogy. So I thought I'd show you that clip and then do a little bit more analysis, give a little bit more context to what I was saying and what we were trying to get at.
The analogy that I've been talking about with one of the coaches on Deep Space has been basically about like playing rugby. You know how like a lot of the success in rugby, I mean, obviously comes from lateral movement because that's the majority of the game.
Yeah.
In terms of like that's the entire game in terms of passing. But like basically, it's like attack one sideline.
Oh, this is pretty cool.
Um,
This is first ever layout.
oh,
There you go.
nice, nice. Wait, 3.14 on the back as well. Legend. Um, yeah. So basically, attacking attacking laterally,
Yeah.
and then maybe not up until the point when you've got traps, but a
Yeah.
bit in field of that, and just literally reversing the play, going all the way back the other way,
Yeah.
and kind of creating this like sweeping ascent of the pitch. Right? It's
Yeah.
like, um, uh, yeah. Oh, this okay, cool. Stream is
So
back. Nice.
yeah, so Joe Schmidt, who was the Ireland coach last cycle, like last World Cup cycle, his offensive principles are that you do move the defenders side to side as much as possible, but never in the 15-meter channel, or is it 10-meter channel? So the pitch is broken up like the 5-meter channel, and
Yeah.
then there's a 10 or 15-meter channel.
Right.
Obviously it's a lot wider as on a rugby pitch.
Yeah.
So you never enter that part of the pitch with the ball until you have a substantial overlap. So you have more numbers to pass to outside of
Right.
their
I,
widest defender.
yeah, yeah. Because then you get because otherwise you reach a point where you can only pass one way, right?
Yes, exactly.
Um,
You've got to have options either way.
otherwise they can just trap you.
Yeah, that's why I like the wide space, the half
Yeah, the white space
space.
analogy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because then you're always moving it half space to half space, and then if you have that overlap in the wide space, you have someone to bounce off. So if you're here with the disc, you can then how have I done that? You can then progress the disc and get it straight back by cutting
Yeah,
up with the disc
into
and
half
move it
space. Yeah,
straight out of the way of the wide channel. Whereas up until then, you probably just want to play with the disc
like middle
between
pitch.
here and here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
tire them out. Me back again. So I thought I'd just go over what we were talking about in terms of the rugby pitch. So with a rugby pitch, sidelines, and then you have a 5-meter line, 5-meter channel, both sides. You also have a 10-meter channel. I think I've drawn this pretty narrow, but on a wide rugby pitch, these would look a lot smaller and there'd be a lot more space in between. So what we were talking about is with Joe Schmidt's teams. So he's now the All Blacks offensive coach, but previously he was Ireland's head coach. What they would do is try and play in between the two 5-meter lines. So they'd never go outside this area here, because they were kind of playing the percentages. So if they did get out here, there's more chance of a turnover of possession because they could get forced out of the pitch, that sort of thing. But what it also gives you is not very good attacking options. So if you have a ruck out here, then your team can only line up across this way on the, what do they call it? The open side? No, not the open side. Yeah, the open side. And then this would be the blind side. So you can only line up on the open side, which then gives the defenders the best possible chance to mark you almost person to person or cover space really well. Whereas if the ruck is even set up just a little bit more in field, That then gives you the chance to set up blindside runners as well as runners on the open side, and then that gives the defense a little bit more of a headache where they have to leave defenders to cover that space. That then gives you the opportunity to end up with maybe a 1-on-1 or even a 2-on-1 in the outer channel. But the important thing is that they don't just play this off first phase. If it's off first phase, so this is the first ruck here, oops, the first ruck happens here, and then they just play it out wide straight away, then it's quite easy for the defenders to drift to cover the space, and then eventually you end up with the same problem where you don't really have that 1-on-1 or 2-on-1. So what they'll do instead, is play a few rucks here, try and get over the gain line, so this yellow line is the gain line. Maybe they'll make a few more up, draw a few more yards up, and draw a few more defenders into this ruck. Maybe they'll lose a couple of yards, but as long as they're not losing too many yards, they won't kick the ball away. In international rugby, as soon as you lose the forward momentum, usually you kick for territory rather than hold on to the ball and see if you can progress. So yeah, you play a few more rucks around this area, see if you can draw in players, and then you have the advantage of having maybe a bit more space to put a few more players out on the blind side, and then there's less defenders to cover the open side, and hopefully you can then progress to the 1 or 2v1 in the outside wing once your team has set up the other team for this. So what this is called, I'm not sure if it's the same in rugby, but in football it's called a dynamic overload. So it's creating overloads in the wide space without setting it up to look that way. So you're doing it dynamically, whereas, like I said, off the first phase of play, if you play it out wide straight away, there's more chance of the defenders drifting to cover that space. So in football, this kind of dynamic overload is usually created by playing shorter passes in triangles or quadrilaterals in a smaller amount of space. So you kind of keep the play to one side. You play these short passes here to draw the defenders over, so the defenders are always playing usually zonally to cover their goals. So what you can do is move the defenders out here, because they don't want these big gaps in between their back four, and their midfield is going to move over. I don't know what the forwards will do here, but all the defenders will move over, so you end up maybe more like this. So there's less space to play balls in behind the back four to run onto, because they've closed these gaps to a bit smaller. But what you then do get is a lot more space out here. So you'll see people holding the width as their team play around here, drawing the defenders a bit more, and once they're ready to release this player, so this player will probably be their best one-on-one player, they'll then move the ball back, or if they can, with one pass straight over, back and across, dump and swing if you will, to get this player playing against the one defender, or maybe if the midfield shifts over it, maybe they may have some more players coming out to you. But the point is that you have then created the dynamic overload to then try and play against one player, get in behind to either attack the goal yourself or to get a cross in to players rushing through the middle. So that's just the way the footballers do it. So I thought I'd talk about Pep Guardiola. So Pep Guardiola started off his career as Barcelona manager, and he went from the B team to the A team within a year, I think. And his style of play was often called tiki-taka, and basically it just meant passing for passing's sake. But he actually dislikes that analogy. So his ethos is actually positional play. So always trying to create overloads in different areas of the pitch by keeping his wingers wide, playing almost a front five. So if you're playing against a back four, you can always try and create 2v1. So you can get the ball out here and you can either play it in here and run around yourself, or the ball is here and you play it in behind for either this player or this player. And yeah, it's just a way of trying to spread out the defenders to create those dynamic overloads even in smaller areas, or to play against a back 4 or 5 that has come across to try and cover the ball out here. Ooh. Tries to cover the ball out here, and then you've got 1 or 2 players out wide, so then you can switch the play either straight away or around the back to get it out there to try and play 2v1 or 1v1. It's obviously a lot easier in football because you can dribble. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'll move on to how I think this could possibly be used in Ultimate. So if I set up a pitch, so I think everyone kind of knows the same third, hucks, whatever. So creating a pitch that is split into thirds. And what you see is the obvious way of creating overloads is probably when teams play a side stack. So you've got all your players in 1/3 to try and create mass space to play out in here, 1v1. And obviously if a team is marking you person to person, then it does become easy to isolate players one against one. So you'll see a player out here being defended 1v1, and then it's just a huge amount of space to try and cover as a singular defender. So what you're seeing more and more now is obviously a lot more help defense, a lot more junk sets to start in the first phase of play, so off the pull, to try and get people not playing such isolation offense. So you'll get people, either playing strict zone or helping out off these people and sandwiching the stacks, and then it just creates better chance for the defenders to cover such a massive space. So my suggestion is that you kind of have to try and earn this overload by creating dynamic overload. So what we could do is, if you're set up in horizontal, what I've been talking about with my teams is trying to clear and create strong space. So let's say the disc is out here, and then we've got the space here in front of the disc. This is the strong space, so this is the easiest space to hit a pass. But obviously if these players are defended, if these players are defended, it becomes a lot harder just to hit an easy pass to these people. So they have to either jig about in this space, which is quite a small space to jig about in and try and get free, which is not necessarily the best plan, or they both clear straight away in an attacking way. They could go deep, whatever, to create opportunity for maybe this player if they were a bit further over, to set up their defender to then attack the strong space. So this space out here is called the weak space, that's not in front of the disc. So it's a harder, if they were to pass straight from the person with the disc to this person out here, it would be a harder throw due to the nature of Ultimate, where there'd be defenders covering, you know, lots of poaches, and also the distance then increases the chance of a turnover. So that's the weak space. So we want to create strong space and weak space that is dynamic. So as the disc moves across the pitch, that strong space changes. So the disc would be in the middle, the strong space may be in the middle, or the disc might swing all the way out, and then the strong space would be out here. So as the disc moves, you know, as a offensive player, you need to clear this strong space so someone else has a better opportunity to try and come into that space. So dynamically, as the disc moves side to side, you can create overloads by clearing dynamically, and creating space for your teammates. Obviously, we also have hex setups, which can use the hex shape. Obviously, if they're in flow, it wouldn't necessarily look like this, but maybe if you're willing to create dynamic overloads, you may want to drop a player. So you may just want to play with 4 or 5 out here to create passing triangles, create flow in this space to draw in defenders. Let me get my pen. So you draw in defenders to this space by keeping the disc. Obviously you can progress the disc still, but you keep the disc passing around here, small triangles, disc is moving, still want to progress the play, and the defenders are getting drawn in. And as you see that happening, as maybe flow stops or defenders are getting drawn in, you may want to release the disc across this person, and then you may have a 1v1 or even a 2v1 depending on what the defenders decide they want to do, and you've got a mass amount of space to then play that disc, whether you want to try and 2v1, 2v2 dribble it up the field, or you want to create a big channel to try and get a big pass off. You know, that's your prerogative, but I just thought I'd, you know, give some examples of where I think maybe this sort of thing could go to, you know, start introducing it to the world of Ultimate, rather than try and develop our own fresh ideas without input from other sports, whereas football and rugby are decades, even centuries old, and have had a lot more tactical development than Ultimate has, and I think these ideas can be transferred over. So hopefully that gives you a bit more context, gives you a bit more idea of where I'm coming from in my head, and hopefully I can release some more videos that follow this trend of introducing other sports tactics into Ultimate. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I didn't rattle on too long, and please feel free to ask me any questions. Thanks.